What's up, everyone? It's Grimm here, Joshua D. Maley, with Night 7 of 31 Nights, 31 Frights. Every night in October, I'll be watching a horror or Halloween-themed movie and offering up a quick, mostly spoiler-free look at it for you, see if it's a worthy addition to your own Halloween viewing lineup. All right, folks, pop quiz. What do you get when you cross Edward Scissorhands with The Nightmare Before Christmas? Give up? You get tonight's review, Corpse Bride. This Tim Burton, Mike Johnson directed film was released on September 23rd, 2005. Running time is 1 hour and 17 minutes. The script was apparently written by committee, with Burton and Carlos Grengal getting characters writing credits, and screenplay credits going to John August, Carolyn Thompson, and Pamela Petler. Like every Tim Burton movie made since Batman Returns, Corpse Bride stars Johnny Depp as Victor Van Dort and Helena Bonham Carter as the Corpse Bride herself, Emily. Speaking of Emily, Emily Watson also stars as Victoria Everglot, Victor's intended. Of special note, the incredible Christopher Lee guest stars as Pastor Galswells, and Richard E. Grant stars as the villainous Barkis Bittern. So, we got a damn strong lineup here, folks. The film opens in a gray, unpleasant landscape with the parents of Victor and Victoria scheming to wed off their children to the other family in the hopes of partaking in that family's wealth. Problem is, neither family has any wealth to speak of. Victor and Victoria, meanwhile, are rather preoccupied with worry over whether or not they're even going to like each other, much less love each other. When Victor screws up the rehearsal ceremony, prompting everyone involved to completely overreact, he flees the scene and practices his vows in the forest. He happens to slip the ring onto a tree root after successfully completing his vows one whole time, and oops, it wasn't a tree root. It was the decomposing finger of an unfortunate murder victim who was brought back to life and rather hastily agrees to marry this complete and total stranger. Twoo-wov. The Corpse Bride, Emily, pulls Victor into the underworld where he awakens in a pub full of dead people. A one-eyed skeleton that sounds suspiciously like Danny Elfman, mainly because it's Danny Elfman, sings Victor the tale of the Corpse Bride as his backup chorus gleefully tells Victor, "Die, die, we all pass away." At least they're happy about it. Victor decides if he has to marry a girl he's just met, he'd rather it be the one that still has a heartbeat and skin covering at least most of her surface. So he tricks Emily into getting him back to the world of the living. His brush with death has made him desperate to marry Victoria, who is just as tickled to tie the knot with him. Emily shows up and cockblocks Victor, however, and drags him back to the underworld. Meanwhile, a charming stranger who is definitely not a bad guy at all, Barkis Bittern, totally not a bad guy's name, has arrived and seems to want to woo Victoria for himself. The film has a few light twists, all of which you'll probably see coming. The ending is a little too, shall we say, convenient to be believable. And I say that about a movie that features the living and the dead singing and dancing. This is obviously a Tim Burton film. It contains all of his trademark elements, and even as far back as 2005, those elements were starting to feel just a little recycled. It features a pale-faced Johnny Depp stumbling his way awkwardly through a beautifully macabre landscape full of quirky, spooky stuff that is also a staple of Burton's PG-rated horror work, accompanied, of course, by Helena Bonham Carter, who has starred in a great many of Burton's films as well, and a soundtrack by Danny Elfman. Now, watching this movie fresh 12 years ago, it definitely felt enjoyable and new. Watching it now, and having seen a dozen more Tim Burton, Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter, Danny Elfman movies, all of which look very similar and feel very similar, it's a little harder to be forgiving. Despite the subject matter, nothing here feels too dark or scary. The world of the dead is brought to vivid life, perhaps somewhat ironically, since the world of the living is portrayed in numerous shades of black and gray. Now, the design choice is obviously Burton bringing out the themes of his work, Life is misery, death is a release, perhaps, something along those lines. The music isn't terribly memorable, not the score or the actual musical numbers. The Corpse Bride song that Elfman sings when Victor arrives in the underworld is probably the catchiest track in the film, and I usually find myself humming it for days after I watch this. So, is this one worth adding to your lineup? I think the answer to that one depends on your fondness for Tim Burton's Burtoniness. This film contains all of his staples, and they're all used in very similar ways to many of his other films. And again, while a lot of it felt fresh when this movie was released, we've had a lot more Burton films kind of burned into our collective unconscious mind, and all of them contain echoes of what you see here. So if you love Tim Burton's work, and you don't mind the repetitive themes, similar visual styles, and the same basic cast, then you'll probably enjoy the hell out of this one. It is a lot of fun. If you're of the mindset that Burton's work is becoming watered down or stale, it'd probably be better to skip this one. Odds are you've already seen pieces of it in his other films anyway. That's it for this episode of 31 Nights, 31 Frights. Thanks for listening. Please be sure to tune in tomorrow for another quick look at some spooky cinema. In the meantime, I hope you'll consider subscribing and at least taking a look at all of the other shows that Grimm Scary Tales has to offer.